Hey everyone, welcome back. So over the past couple of weeks, I've been noticing a lot of videos on YouTube about housing crash, the incoming bubble that's coming up, and housing is going to crash and all that stuff. And it kind of got me thinking I want to do a little bit of research on my own. So I'm going to cover a couple articles that I read. We'll go over them obviously with you guys, and kind of give you also a spreadsheet as far as what the interest rates with them going up, what that means actually for home buyers nowadays. So I wanted to point this out to you guys. So here's some examples of it. So we got Millennial Money, obviously. One of their two most recent videos while we're finally selling out real estate, right? So there's a lot of, they're kind of doing a little clickbait here, cashing out of real estate, all these kind of topics, but they actually go into it that the market is actually not that bad. Same thing here with Graham Stephan. So Graham Stephan had a video just out. It's over. The housing bubble just popped, right? So we're seeing all this kind of fear being spread right now. It's over, why the housing market is screwed, why you'll regret buying a house in 2022. So you're kind of seeing this pattern here evolving over the last couple of weeks in the YouTube space, along with Meet Kevin, the 2022 housing market collapse, the truth. I will give it to Kevin and Graham. They both had pretty good videos recently on it where they actually explained that the housing market is not actually as bad as it sounds. But the titles obviously make you think otherwise. So why don't we get into the stories that I have here to provide you guys some context on it all. So this is from Fortune online. So we'll go over some of the main points here. It's going to be maybe a little bit longer video than usual, but I don't think we're going to be in a housing bubble like we were in 2008. And here are some of the reasons why. So hopefully this will give you guys a little bit more of a background as far as what's the difference between now and what it was like in 2008. So a housing bubble is brewing, but not like 2008, says Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, right? So we learned on Tuesday that the year-over-year U.S. housing price growth accelerated to 19.2% in January. That's up from 11.3% uptick posted at the same time last year. So basically we're up, almost 30-some-odd% over the last 2 years. The latest jump is also well above the peak annual rate of 14.5% posted in the lead up to the 2008 housing bubble. But we've had obviously other things that have happened since then, and things are looking a little bit differently. So that stubbornly hot housing market is beginning to raise more eyebrows, which a lot of people are obviously thinking that. But the Dallas Fed researchers came out to that conclusion after comparing U.S. home prices to underlying economic data. Our evidence points to abnormal U.S. housing market behavior for the first time since the boom of early 2000s. Reasons for concern are clear in certain economic indicators. House prices appear increasingly out of step with fundamentals, wrote obviously the Dallas Fed researchers. Amid the pandemic, historically low mortgage rates and demographic wave of first-time millennial home buyers helped to spur the ongoing housing boom. However, that alone can explain the explosion in home prices. Another factor argues that researchers could be fear of missing out, or home shoppers who think they could be left behind if they don't rush into the market. That's concerning considering that FOMO home buying was a key ingredient in the last housing bubble. But there was obviously other things as well in that. One of the things was, I'm trying to think back here now, one of the things was you didn't have to have proof of employment. It was just easy monetary policy with regards to home buying. We're not seeing that this time around, but we'll get into that as well. Here's the U.S. home price growth over the last number of years from 2001 or 2000 to 2021. We obviously had that crash in 2008 where prices, obviously dropped in the years following. Some haven't rebounded until well into the 2010s. And then obviously we saw a huge spike in the pricing. Now we've obviously had a lot of monetary policy where the government was giving out money, which also helped drive the prices up this time around. So here's the good news. While researchers at the Dallas Fed see a bubbly housing market, they don't think we're headed for a 2008 style crash. For starters, households are in much better shape today, which is true. Back in 2007, 7% of the U.S. disposable personal income was going towards mortgage debt service, which was a lot. Service payments, and its latest reading last year, that figure was just 3.8%, so about half of where it was back in 2008. Based on present evidence, there is no expectation that fallout from a housing correction would be comparable to the 2007-2009 global financial crisis in terms of magnitude or macroeconomic gravity. Among other things, household balance sheets appear in better shape, and excessive borrowing doesn't appear to be fueling the housing market boom, writes the researchers, which is also true, right? You had people taking out risky loans that had balloons on them, and things just went crazy during that time period. Industry insiders are hoping that spiking mortgage rates, with the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate climbing from 3.11% to 4.42% over the past 12 weeks, can help tame runaway home prices growth before prices get so high it leads to a bursting bubble, which we'll take a look at that also in my spreadsheet. We'll see how that is affecting, obviously, the ability to how much of a home you can buy. So if rates rise above 5%, you will price buyers out of the market. I don't even think you have to have 5%. You can be much lower than that. The higher the rates could also discourage investor activity, which accounts for a large portion of home sales today. And back in 2006, mortgage rates quickly shot up. Those higher rates at a time when many households had variable mortgage rates ultimately sped up the demise of the countless subprime mortgages and set the stage for an inevitable 2008 financial crisis, which is true. Back then you didn't have to provide, I can't remember what the exact term of it was, but basically you could get a loan with just writing down that you made X amount of money and you didn't have to provide proof of it. So that was one thing. The other thing was obviously the balloon mortgages. You could get like a 3% mortgage and then it would jump up to like a 7% mortgage after 5-7 years or something like that, which really hurt a lot of people during that time. This time, in theory, at least, rising mortgage rates should play out differently. While it will certainly deter some would-be buyers from entering the market, it would have little impact on homeowners. These days, around 99% of the mortgages have fixed rates, which is true. So there's this part of the story. Next is the housing market just hit a level not seen since 2007. So getting a little clickbaity here. So even as prices soared, many buyers' monthly payments remained reasonable. Those days are behind us. Now that rates have returned to pre-pandemic levels, new home buyers are starting to feel the full weight of record prices, which is also true. So back in December, the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate set at 3.11. A borrower who took out a $500,000 mortgage at 3.11 rate would have seen a monthly principal and interest payment of around $2,137. Now that the average rate is up to 4.72, a new loan at that size would equal to $2,599 monthly payment. So that's an increase of over $460 or so. That's a lot. Over the course of the 30 years, that's an additional $166,000 that you're paying on that loan. Here is borrowers are getting squeezed by soaring mortgage rates. So you can see mortgage payment to income ratio. Back in 2006 and 2008, between that, we were above 30%. We are at 29% right now, so we're not that high yet as we were before, but we're getting close to it. And the interest rates going up, I think, is going to pull that down a little bit. So while affordability, or better put, lack of affordability, levels are beginning to show glimpses of the mid-2000s housing market, it doesn't mean we should pencil in a 2008 housing crash just yet, right? During the last housing boom, home builders were churning out homes at an unsustainable level. Once the housing market began to slow down around the 2006 timeframe, the market quickly became oversaturated with supply, something that caused prices to sink further. And if you can remember going back that far, I remember in the area that I was living in, houses were popping up like weeds. Communities were being built within 2-3 years. It was just, it was crazy. It was nuts the way everything was going. So supply obviously outgrew demand during that time and things had to crash. Plus we had the interest rates going up and other things contributed to it as well. So this time around, home builders aren't even keeping up with demand and demographics. If a slump does come, industry insiders tell Fortune it is unlikely inventory would flip from severely undersupplied into a 2009-like housing glut. The mortgage market is mostly fixed rates, so raising rates won't raise the monthly payments on current owners, but instead will disproportionately impact first-time homebuyers, which is true. So this is kind of important. The mortgage rates is mostly fixed rates, so raising rates won't raise the monthly payment on current owners, right? So if you locked in a rate, obviously at 3%, whatever it is, it's not going to go to 7% in a couple of years on you, and you're going to be, really hurting then, especially if you lose your job or something like that, or something happens, you could be in a lot of trouble then. So robust mortgage underwriting should keep foreclosures limited, preventing the forced selling that would weigh on home prices wrote Morgan Stanley researchers in a report published late last week. So this is obviously true as well with having mortgages well written right now, and there isn't a lot of variable interest rate mortgages out there. It's all pretty much fixed rates. We shouldn't see obviously a lot of foreclosures hitting the market, which obviously did a lot to lower the amount that somebody was asking for a house, right? So the pricing is not going to drop like it did before. So here's the U.S. home price growth, obviously, as well. We saw that in the other chart as well. So there's a growing chorus of housing economists rooting for soaring mortgage rates to pull some steam out of the housing market. In their eyes, the rate of home appreciation is simply unsustainable, and if it continues beyond 2022, it risks the housing market getting overheated, which is true as well. That's why we're seeing, obviously, the rates going up right now. Rising rates not only price some buyers out of the market, it also means some borrowers who must meet lenders' strict debt-to-income ratios will lose their loan eligibility. So, as the rates have been rising relatively quickly in the last couple of weeks, if you didn't lock in your rate at a certain point that you could afford and it has gone up, you might be, basically having to either look for a house that's less expensive, or you're not going to be able to get a loan at all, or you're going to have to put down more down payment on it. So while home prices appreciation should decelerate, we believe it will remain supported by tight supply. In fact, rising rates themselves will contribute to keeping supply subdued, as homeowners will be locked in and less likely to sell at their current lower rates, writes Morgan Stanley researcher. This is also true. I refinanced about a year and a half ago now at, to be honest, 1.9% on a 30-year fixed rate. There is no way in heck I am selling my house right now. Not with the way the rates are going up and everything else, even though my house has appreciated. I have thought about actually pulling equity out of it, but I would have to refinance at a much higher rate, which doesn't really make much sense anyway. So my thinking is I'm just going to stick it out, make my house as beautiful as I can, put in a pool down the road, make it a paradise for myself to live in, right? I'm not moving anywhere anytime soon. So I think a lot of people are going to be doing the same thing. So that is obviously very interesting and something worthwhile. So there's also one more story that I wanted to cover, which is here, which are 3 charts show why housing market won't crash anytime soon. And this is kind of interesting as well. So here's so millennials are the biggest demographic in the country, and we can see this here on the chart, but I'm not going to get into it too detailed. But here's the major point of it. So the majority of the most common age groups for the next decade and a half will be people in their 30s and 40s. The baby boomers have dominated demographics in this country for decades, but now millennials have taken their seat on the throne, right? So the millennials are getting to the point where they're having families, kids, and they're moving out into the suburbs. Many young people did put off settling down for longer than their parents' generation, but eventually people grow up, they have kids and responsibilities and move to the suburbs. And when this happens, most people want to buy a house. We also saw a huge exodus, obviously, when we had the pandemic, when cities were shutting down, everything like that. People were basically, you couldn't go to the theaters, you couldn't go out to restaurants. People decided they had enough of the city life. They wanted to move out west, out into the suburbs, and basically have more room during that time. And I think that's going to continue on going forward. That's exactly what's happening. So millennials accounted for more than half of all mortgage loan applications in 2021, which is huge. We don't have enough housing supply, so here's the other part. So the housing market crash that began in 2006 was devastating to many homeowners, but it also has a huge problem for builders. Many had overextended themselves and got caught holding the bag when housing prices eventually fell more than 30%. That period left some serious scars, so builders pulled back in a big way. Housing starts in the U.S. went from 2.3 million in January of 2006 to 490,000 by January of 2009. A huge difference there, almost. That went down almost, 1.8 million or so difference. So that's a huge. And we can see here we didn't build enough homes. So U.S. housing starts after the 2008 crash. Things went down really low, and we've been slowly picking back up, but we're still not up to the levels where we should be. So there were roughly 210 million people in the United States in the early 1970s, and they were building more than 2 million houses a year. There are now 330 million people, and last year there were less than 1.3 million houses completed. Just think about that. We had 210, we built 2 million homes, we have 330 million. That's an increase of 120 million people, and we're building 0.7 million homes less a year. So this number is now moving in the right direction, but years of underbuilding have taken a toll. A massive flood of new homes is required to catch up to current demand. And that is also true. So we just don't have enough supply right now for the demand of it, which is obviously going to keep the prices up for the foreseeable future. Mike Simonson of Altos Research notes that we now have the lowest inventory of listing on a record. As recently as 2015, there were as many as 1.2 million homes for sale in the United States. That number is closer to 260,000 for the entire country, which is just really, really low right now. So the supply is just not there. The other thing is no one wants to sell, right? So according to housing expert Logan Mohtashami, people lived in their homes for an average of 5 years between 1987 and 2007, but since 2008, that average has now doubled to 10 years. So people are obviously staying in their homes a lot longer. That leads to less supply for people wanting to sell. People are staying in their homes longer and for good reason. So in 1973, the median new home being built was around 1,500 square feet of space and had an average of 3 people living in it. Today, the average new home has close to 2,500 square feet of space. Half of them have 4 bedrooms or more, and that has dropped from 3 people to 2.5 people basically per house. So people are obviously having a lot more space in the houses that they are buying now or being built. And then, and half of the new homes built in 1973 came with no air conditioning. Houses today are bigger, better, and have fewer people living in them together. It's no wonder people are staying put, right? Then you have the fact that mortgage rates have touched generational lows during the pandemic. Like I said, I was able to get it really low. With housing prices rising at a fast clip and at low cost to service the debt, it's no wonder people don't want to move as much as they did in the past, which is also true. Consumer balance sheet remains strong, so while home prices are rising even faster than they did during the subprime real estate bubble, the profile of home buyers is far different this time around. Mortgage debt as a percentage of disposable income is near its lowest levels on record from a combination of low interest rates and rising home prices. So here's the U.S. household mortgage debt service as percentage of disposable income. So now we are at 3.8%. Back in 2008, we were as high as 7.1%. Huge difference, right? While mortgage rates have risen in recent months, people have had the past 18 months or so to lock in some of the lowest borrowing rates on record. For 2/3 of the country who own a home, the combination of rising prices and falling mortgage rates mean their payments have fallen and their asset is now worth more than ever, which is true. Homeowners are now sitting on more than $25 trillion in home equity, up from $19.5 trillion before the onset of the pandemic. While home equity is up more than $5 trillion, total mortgage debt has risen just over $1 trillion at that time, right? So really good ratio there. At the height of the housing bubble in 2006, roughly 50% of all borrowers taking out mortgage had a credit score of less than 720, right? So that led to a lot of, obviously, the foreclosures, people not being able to make payments. Fewer than 1/4 of borrowers had a credit score of above 760. Today, just 18% of those originating a new mortgage have a credit score below 720, while 2/3 of borrowers are above 760. Huge difference in who is actually being qualified for mortgages now, which is also good. Of course, all of this data isn't very helpful to those who are aspiring to become homeowners. While things look rosy for current homeowners, this is possibly one of the worst times ever to be a first-time homebuyer, which obviously the housing rates going up, the mortgages, interest rates going up, and the prices going up are obviously not good. The good news is housing can't continue going up 20% a year over year indefinitely. The pace of growth will eventually cool off, but there is a huge difference between price growth slowing down and a crash that would make prices more affordable for those looking at listings on Zillow every day, which is true. So like I keep saying, I don't keep saying it, but I believe we're not going to have a bubble. I think we're just going to have a cool down period. We're going to slow down a little bit. We may have a drop, maybe 1%, 3%, 5% at the most in some areas. But overall, I think the housing market is going to be strong. We have the biggest demographic in the country in their prime household formation years. We underbuilt houses for decades. Current homeowners are going to have a hard time letting go of their 3% mortgages to buy a new place. And the finances of those buying are in such good shape that people are willing to pay up for a house right now. This is far from healthy housing market. Unfortunately, things could remain unhealthy for years to come. If you're waiting for another housing market crash to buy in lower prices, you'll likely be waiting for a very long time, right? So I hope that kind of helps you guys understand what's going on in the market. We've had different dynamics back in 2008 during the housing crash market then. Where we are now, it's totally different as well. So I think we're not going to see a big housing crash happen. We may see a cool down. We may see prices come down a little bit, maybe, like I said, 1.35%. But if you're in the market now, obviously with interest rates going up, you're going to get less for your money. And let's look into that right now. I'll show you guys on the spreadsheet here. So hopefully you guys can see this pretty well. Let me zoom this in maybe a little bit more so that way you guys can see it a little bit better. There we go. So this is something I just created today just to kind of work the numbers a little bit. But here's what I wanted to point out to you. So let's say that you are making, whether it's a family or individual, you're making $100,000 a year. I'm using ideal monthly payment of basically, this is 33% of your gross income. Down payment is $20,000. It's probably going to be a little bit more than that. You probably want to at least get 5% on it. And then debt, other debt, it includes car payment, credit card, property taxes, school. And then if you're under 20% down on the house, you're going to have a PMI, which is going to be anywhere between $100, $150 or something like that. So if you're a family right now, you got 2 car payments. We want to include it, probably property taxes in that, maybe $500. Car payments, maybe $800, $900, and then another $100. So let's just do the math here. Let's just go with, we'll do a total of about $1,600 for all of your debt that you got to do. That basically will let you get a house, or a loan at least, with the amount of debt you have at about $311,000 at 2%. You obviously have a down payment of 20%, so you could get a house as high as $331,000, right? So that's at 2% here. Obviously, the interest rates have gone up. We're up to about 4.5% right now. That means you could at most buy a house around $246,000 right now. And one of the things that has obviously led to the housing market getting a little bit overheated is because interest rates have fallen down. People have been able to afford more. So they have been basically outbidding each other to get that property, to get those properties. So as you saw the rates go down, you could buy more of a house, right? So if you were making $150,000 combined with you and your spouse, obviously your payments are going to be a little bit higher because you're going to be paying in a better area. Let's say you're now $1,900 with property taxes and everything else. That's even low. Let's go $2,400 on that. So now you're still looking at $486,000 at 2%, but at 4.5%, you're looking at a house at $360,000 at most. So that's a big difference, right? So if we put that in here at 4.5, we're now at 360. If rates continue to go up, let's say they get up to 5 3/4, now you're looking at 315,000. That's a big difference now. So obviously people are going to have to make some changes in as far as whether they're going to be buying, what type of house they're going to be buying, where they're going to be buying it. They're not going to be able to possibly get as big of a house as they wanted as before, as the interest rates were lower, especially when they were around 2%. I mean, you could get a heck of a lot more house, and people were doing that and trying to outbid each other on it. And that's why the housing market went up. What else can I show you guys here? I just wanted to show basically how this all would work out and how it actually has affected pricing of housing in the past 2 years. As interest rates have gone down, you're able to get more. As interest rates go up, you're going to be buying less of a house for it, which in the long run, I believe is going to cool down the market, or at least it should in theory, right? It should cool down the market enough to where we're not seeing this 15, 20% growth each year in the value of housing. We may see more subdued, 3, 5% growth or something like that going forward, especially depending where the interest rates actually end up at. My first house that I bought was a townhouse. I had an interest rate of 7.5% on it to start out with. My second house that I bought was a townhouse as well, was 5.5%. I was able to get a little bit more, obviously, and that was also with after the housing market crash of 2008. I bought it in 2000, right before I bought it in 2007. So I actually bought at the peak of it, and then when I actually ended up selling it, I actually lost money on it because I was upside down in the loan. I had to actually pay into it to get out of the loan. But that's another story. So you got to be careful when you buy. And a lot of people are, I think, careful right now, thinking that this is a bubble, that they don't want to buy it at the peak. It could be the case, but I don't think it is. But obviously do your own research on this. And I think the market is going to just kind of go up slowly and going into 2023, 2024, and so on. So let me know what you guys thought of all this. And like I said, if you got in obviously at a really low rate, let me know what you guys are thinking. Are you guys thinking about selling right now, or are you going to be holding on for it for a while like I am? I got in at 1.9. I'm not moving anywhere right now. But I am looking to buy investment properties possibly, and this is obviously impacting as far as what I can buy, with the interest rates going up. So let me know what you guys thought of this. Obviously, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned something out of it. And the only thing I ask is you guys hit the like button, subscribe. Helps me out tremendously. Have a great night. I'll see you guys in the next one.